The sun hung low over the sprawling plains, casting a golden hue across the dusty trails of the Willow Creek Ranch. The twins, Ellie and Ethan, barely 10 years old, stood on the creaking porch of their weathered home, their eyes wide with fear and shimmering with unshed tears. Their mother, Clara, lay inside, her frail body wrapped in a patchwork quilt, her breaths shallow and uneven. The illness had come like a thief in the night, stealing her strength, her laughter, and the warmth that once filled their home. The twins clung to each other, their small hands trembling as they whispered their fears. "Are you going to kill our mama?" they had asked the doctor that morning, their voices breaking as they clutched his coat. The doctor, a stern man with a face carved by years of delivering hard truths, only shook his head and muttered about miracles. But miracles were scarce in Willow Creek, a place where the land was as unforgiving as the winters. The twins had heard of the rancher, Heel, a man shrouded in whispers and legends, who lived on the edge of the valley. Some called him a healer, others a hermit, but all agreed he was their last hope. The children decided they would find him, no matter the cost. They slipped out as the stars began to prick the sky, their boots kicking up dust as they ran toward the unknown, driven by love and desperation. The ranch was vast, its fields stretching endlessly under the watchful eyes of ancient oaks. The twins moved through the tall grass, their hearts pounding with every rustle, every shadow. They didn't know what they'd find, but they knew their mother's life depended on it. The air grew cooler, the nights heavier, and the weight of their mission pressed against their young shoulders. They whispered her name like a prayer, hoping it would guide them to the man who could save her. Heel's cabin was said to be hidden beyond the creek, where the land dipped into a hollow that few dared to cross. The twins pushed forward, their courage fueled by the memory of their mother's smile, now faded but not forgotten. The night was alive with sounds of crickets, owls, and the distant howl of a kata, but they didn't falter. They couldn't, not when every moment brought their mother closer to the edge. The path was treacherous, lined with thorns and uneven stones, but Ellie's determination and Ethan's quiet strength kept them moving. They spoke in hushed tones, promising each other they'd bring Heel back, that they'd save her. The stars above seemed to flicker in approval, guiding them toward the faint glow of a lantern in the distance. It was Heel's cabin, a small, weathered structure that looked as though it had grown from the earth itself. The twins hesitated, their breaths catching as they stood before the door. They knocked, their small fists pounding against the wood, and waited, hearts thundering, for the man who might hold their mother's fate. The door creaked open, revealing a man whose presence seemed to fill the night. Heel was tall, his face weathered like the bark of an old tree, his eyes sharp yet kind, carrying the weight of secrets untold. The twins stood frozen, their words tumbling out in a rush. "Our mom is dying," Ellie blurted, her voice cracking. "Please, you have to help her." Ethan nodded, his eyes pleading. Too scared to speak, Heel studied them, his gaze piercing but not unkind, as if he could see the pain etched into their young souls. He didn't ask questions at first, only gestured for them to come inside. The cabin was warm, cluttered with jars of herbs, dried roots, and strange instruments that gleamed in the firelight. The air smelled of sage and something earthy, almost alive. Heel sat them down at a rough-hewn table, pouring hot tea that smelled of mint and hope. He listened as they spoke of Clara, of her laughter that once echoed through the ranch, of her hands that braided Ellie's hair and taught Ethan to whittle. They told him of the fever that came without warning, of the doctor's grim face, of their fear that they'd lose her forever. Heel's expression remained steady, but his eyes softened, as if their words stirred something deep within him. He asked about her symptoms, how long the fever had burned, how her breath rattled, how her skin paled. The twins answered as best they could, their voices trembling but resolute. Heel nodded, rising to gather a leather satchel from a corner of the room. He packed it with vials, cloths, and bundles of herbs, his movements deliberate but swift. "I'll come," he said simply, his voice low and steady, like the rumble of distant thunder. The twins felt a spark of hope, fragile but real, ignite in their chests. They followed him out into the night, the lantern swinging in his hand, casting shadows that danced like spirits across the ground. The journey back was faster, Heel's long strides eating up the distance as the twins struggled to keep pace. They crossed the creek, the water cold against their ankles, and climbed the hill toward their home. The stars seemed brighter now, as if urging them on. Heel spoke little, but his presence was a comfort, a promise that they weren't alone. The twins clung to that promise, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. They reached the ranch as dawn began to break, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark except for the faint glow of a candle in their mother's room. Heel paused at the door, turning to the twins. "Stay strong," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made them stand taller. They nodded, clutching each other's hands, and followed him inside, their hope now tethered to this stranger who carried the scent of earth and miracles. 3. Inside, the house was heavy with silence, broken only by Clara's labored breathing. The twins led Heel to her room, where she lay pale and still, her once vibrant eyes closed against the world. The sight of her stole the air from their lungs, but Heel moved with purpose. Kneeling beside her bed, he touched her forehead, his fingers gentle but firm, and murmured something under his breath, a prayer, a chant, or perhaps just words to steady himself. The twins watched, wide-eyed, as he opened his satchel and began his work. He crushed herbs between his fingers, their sharp scent filling the room, and mixed them with water from a flask. He pressed a cloth soaked in the mixture to Clara's forehead, whispering to her as if she could hear. The twins stood at the foot of the bed, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles whitened. They wanted to believe in Heel, in the stories they'd heard of his hands bringing life back to those the world had given up on. But doubt gnawed at them, fueled by the doctor's grim words and the sight of their mother's frail form. Heel worked in silence, his movements precise yet unhurried, as if time bent to his will. He brewed a tea from roots and leaves, coaxing Clara to sip it, her lips trembling as she swallowed. The twins held their breath, watching for any signal, a flutter of her eyelids, a deepening of her breath. Hours passed, the candle burning low, casting long shadows across the room. Heel never faltered, his focus unwavering, his hand steady as he applied salves and murmured words of encouragement. The twins began to notice small changes. Clara's breathing seemed less ragged, her face less pale. Or was it their imagination, born of desperate hope? They whispered to each other, afraid to voice their thoughts too loudly, as if hope might shatter under the weight of words. Heel glanced at them, his eyes kind but commanding. "Talk to her," he said. "Let her hear your voices." Ellie hesitated, then began to speak, her voice soft but clear, telling her mother about the wildflowers they'd picked last summer, about Ethan's new carving of a horse. Ethan joined in, his words halting but earnest, recounting how they'd run through the fields, chasing fireflies. Their voices wove a tapestry of memories, filling the room with love and longing. Heel nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, as if their words were part of the medicine. The twins felt the weight of their fear lessen, replaced by a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, their mother would open her eyes again. The room grew warmer, the air lighter, as dawn's light crept through the window, painting Clara's face in soft gold. 4. The morning stretched on, each moment a delicate thread in the tapestry of hope the twins clung to. Heel remained at Clara's side, his hands never idle, adjusting the cloths, brewing more teas, and checking her pulse with a gentleness that belied his rugged appearance. The twins sat close, their eyes fixed on their mother, searching for signs of life returning. They noticed her fingers twitch, a faint movement that sent their hearts racing. Ellie squeezed Ethan's hand, her eyes bright with tears that were equal parts fear and hope. Heel saw it too, his expression unreadable but his movements quickening. He mixed a new poultice, this one smelling of lavender and something sharp, like pine. He spread it across Clara's chest, his hand steady as he worked, his voice low as he spoke to her, urging her to fight. The twins joined in, their voices stronger now, telling stories of their life before the illness, picnics by the creek, Clara's songs under the stars, the way she'd laugh when Ethan tripped over his own feet. The room seemed to hum with their words, as if the love they poured out was a tangible force, wrapping around Clara like a shield. Heel's eyes met theirs, and he nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their strength. The twins felt it too, a connection, a shared purpose that bound them to this stranger who worked to save their mother. Outside, the ranch was waking, the sounds of cattle lowing and birds singing filtering through the walls. But inside, Time seemed to stand still, every second measured by Clara's breaths. The twins began to notice more change as her cheeks held a faint flush. Her breathing grew steadier. Heel's face remained calm, but there was a spark in his eyes, a quiet confidence that fueled their hope. He spoke to them now, his voice low but clear, telling them of the herbs he used, of the old ways passed down from his grandmother, a healer in her own right. He spoke of balance, of the body's will to live when given the right tools. The twins listened, hanging on his words, finding comfort in their rhythm. They began to see Heel not as a stranger, but as a bridge between their fear and their hope. The day wore on, the sun climbing higher, casting light that danced across Clara's face. The twins took turns holding her hand, their small fingers tracing the lines of her palm, willing her to wake. Heel worked tirelessly, his satchel dwindling as he used every remedy he knew. The twins watched, their hearts a tangle of emotions of fear, hope, love, and something new, trust. They trusted Heel, trusted the stories, trusted the faint signs of life stirring in their mother. As noon approached, Clara's eyes fluttered, a movement so slight that might have been missed. But the twins saw it, and their gasps filled the room, a sound of raw, unfiltered hope. The flicker of Clara's eyes was like a spark in the dark, igniting a fire of hope in the twins' hearts. They leaned closer, their voices rising as they called her name, urging her to come back to them. Heel placed a hand on their shoulders, his touch steadying them as he continued his work. He adjusted the poultice, checked her pulse again, and murmured words that seemed to weave magic into the air. The twins watched, their breaths shallow, as Clara's eyelids fluttered again, this time opening just enough to reveal a sliver of her blue eyes. Ellie let out a sob, and Ethan's hand tightened around hers, their joy tempered by the fear that this moment might slip away. Heel's voice was calm but firm, instructing them to keep talking, to keep her tethered to the world. They did, their words tumbling out in a rush of stories, promises, pleas. They told her about the ranch, about the calves born that spring, about the wildflowers they'd plant when she was well. Clara's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile, and the twins' hearts soared. Heel worked faster now, his hands a blur as he mixed another remedy, this one a bitter tea that he gently coaxed Clara to drink. Her throat moved weakly, but she swallowed, and the twins clung to that small victory. The room felt alive now, charged with the energy of their hope, their love, and Heel's quiet determination. Outside, the ranch seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of life muted as if the world knew this was a moment of reckoning. The twins began to notice the small things, of the way Clara's chest rose and fell more steadily, the way her fingers curled slightly around theirs. Heel's face remained focused, but there was a light in his eyes, a certainty that hadn't been there before. He spoke to Clara now, his voice low and rhythmic, telling her of the land, of the strength in her blood, of the children who needed her. The twins joined in, their voices blending with his, creating a harmony that filled the room. They fell tied to the shift, the turning of the tide. Clara's eyes opened wider, her gaze unfocused but alive, searching for her children. Ellie and Ethan cried out, their voices breaking as they called to her, their hands clutching hers. Heel stepped back, giving them space, his work not done but his presence no longer the center of the room. The twins leaned over their mother, their tears falling onto the quilt as they whispered their love, their fear, their hope. Clara's lips moved, a faint sound escaping, too weak to form words but strong enough to carry her will. The twins wept, their joy overwhelming, as they realized she was fighting, truly fighting, to stay with them. Heel watched, his expression unreadable but his eyes warm, as if he saw not just the woman on the bed but the family being stitched back together. 6. The day stretched into afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the room as Clara's strength slowly returned. Her eyes, though tired, stayed open longer now, focusing on the twins' faces as they hovered over her. Ellie and Ethan never left her side, their voices a constant stream of love and encouragement. They told her about their journey to find Heel, about the fear that had gripped them, about the hope that now burned bright. Clara's fingers tightened around theirs, a weak but deliberate squeeze that spoke louder than words. Heel remained in the background, his presence a quiet anchor, checking her pulse, adjusting the poultices, and brewing more teas. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were measured, carrying the weight of experience. He told the twins of the herb's property as to how feverfew could cool the blood, how elderberry could strengthen the spirit. They listened, their young minds soaking up his knowledge, finding comfort in the idea that there was a science, a magic, to what he did. The room was warmer now, the air lighter, as if the weight of death had begun to lift. Outside, the ranch was coming back to life, the sounds of cattle and wind weaving through the open window. The twins began to feel the exhaustion of their sleepless night, but they refused to rest, their eyes fixed on their mother. Clara's voice, when it came, was a whisper, barely audible but a miracle to their ears. "My babies," she said, and the twins dissolved into tears, their laughter mixing with their sobs. Heel smiled, a rare, fleeting thing that softened his weathered face. He stepped forward, checking Clara's forehead, nodding to himself as he confirmed the fever was breaking. The twins watched him, their gratitude unspoken but palpable. They wanted to ask him how he knew what to do, how he'd learned to pull life back from the edge, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, they clung to their mother, their hands tracing her face, her arms, as if to assure themselves she was real. Heel began to pack his satchel, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he knew his work here was nearly done. The twins noticed, their hearts lurching at the thought of him leaving. They wanted him to stay, to be part of this moment, but Heel's eyes told them he was a man who belonged to the land, not to any one place. He spoke to Clara now, his voice gentle, telling her to rest, to eat, to let her body heal. She nodded, her eyes meeting his with a gratitude that needed no words. The twins felt the bond between them all, a thread woven through their shared fight for Clara's life. 7. As evening fell, the ranch glowed under the soft light of dusk, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. Clara was sitting up now, propped against pillows, her face still pale but alive with a quiet strength. The twins sat on either side of her, their hands never leaving hers, their voices filling the room with stories and laughter. Heel stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the fading light, watching the family with a quiet satisfaction. He had done what he came to do, and though his satchel was nearly empty, his heart was full. The twins noticed the change in their mother, the way her eyes sparkled, the way her smile, though weak, lit up the room. They knew they owed it to Heel, to his hands, his herbs, his unshakable belief in life. Ellie stood, her small frame trembling with emotion, and crossed the room to him. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Ethan followed, his own thanks quieter but no less heartfelt. Hill knelt to their level, his eyes meeting theirs. "You saved her too," he said, his voice low and warm. "Your love, your voice," as they called her back. The twins blinked, their hearts swelling with a pride they didn't fully understand. They returned to their mother, curling up beside her, their exhaustion finally catching up. Clara reached for Heel, her hand trembling but strong enough to grasp his. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Heel shook his head, his smile faint but genuine. "Live," he said simply. "That's enough." He stepped back, his satchel slung over his shoulder, and made his way to the door. The twins watched him go, their hearts torn between wanting him to stay and knowing he belonged to the wild places, to the people who needed him next. The door closed softly behind him, and the twins turned back to their mother, their family whole again. Outside, the ranch was quiet, the stars beginning to emerge, each one a testament to the miracles that could happen when hope refused to die. The twins fell asleep beside Clara, their dreams filled with the scent of herbs and the sound of their mother's heartbeat. 8. The days that followed were a slow unfolding of healing, each one brighter than the last. Clara grew stronger, her laughter returning to the ranch like a long-lost song. The twins ran through the fields again, their voices carrying on the wind, their fears replaced by a joy that felt boundless. They spoke of Heel often, their words painting him as a hero, a man who walked the line between myth and reality. The ranch itself seemed to bloom under Clara's recovery, the wildflowers brighter, the cattle healthier, as if the land celebrated with them. The twins never forgot their journey, the night they braved the dark to find the man who could save their mother. They told the story to anyone who would listen, their eyes shining with pride and wonder. Clara, 2. Carried Heel's gift in her heart, her gratitude a quiet flame that burned steady. She began to tend the garden again, planting herbs she'd learned about from Heel's satchel, determined to honor his work. The twins helped, their small hands digging in the earth, their laughter mixing with the scent of lavender and sage. The ranch became a place of stories, of miracles, of love that refused to break. Word of Heel spread, carried by travelers and traders who passed through Willow Creek, each tale adding to his legend. The twins hoped they'd see him again, to thank him properly, to share a meal under the stars. But Heel was a wanderer, his home the open road, his purpose the lives he touched. The twins grew, their bond with their mother stronger for the fear they'd faced together. They learned to listen to the land, to the whispers of the wind, to the lessons Heel had left behind. The ranch thrived, a testament to their resilience, their love, and the man who had given them a second chance. As seasons turned, the twins would sit on the porch, watching the horizon, hoping for a glimpse of a lantern in the distance. They knew Heel was out there, saving others, his hands working miracles in the quiet places of the world. And in their hearts, they carried his words, his strength, and the unshakable truth that love could conquer even the darkest of nights.